Hello everyone, this is Alora and I'm going to show you how to make the 10 rings from Shang-Chi in 5 easy steps. So the first step is we have to make the ring. So first we're going to go to Add, Mesh, Torus, and then we're going to go down here to Add Torus, and we're going to adjust how many segments this torus has to make more of a ring shape. So I'm going to start probably with the minor. Gonna make that 4, and the major segments I'm going to make 60. So now we have this kind of spaceship looking kind of saucer. We're gonna adjust it just a little bit and bevel it so it looks smoother but keeps that sharpness. We're also going to shade it smooth, and we're going to go to its normals, and we're also going to auto smooth it. So after we did that, we are going to go to edit mode. And we're going to select these edges. And if you want to select the whole ring around, you have to shift double click. So I use the bevel tool to create this ring shape. But it's still a little bit pointy in the center, so I'm probably going to bevel that too, so we get more of a ring. There we go. Now we've got a really good looking ring, but doesn't quite look like what we want, because we need a place for all those runes to go. So after we're done beveling, we're going to use the extrude tool to create more of that interior inside the ring. So I'm going to pull this in rather than out. And I'm just going to resize it. And just perfectly place it. And we're going to do the same thing to the exterior ring. We're gonna extrude along normals, and we're gonna pull it in. Just like that. And it looks really good, but it's a bit pointy here. So I'm going to bevel it around these areas, around these edges, and I'm just shift left clicking and beveling. I think that looks really good. It's always good to just look around your model and double check. Make sure to go back in object mode so you can see it without all those lines. And here I'm just making it a little more circular. There we go. And the model is complete. So now all we have to do is add our materials, which is step 2. So for step 2, we're going to be creating the gold material that goes onto the ring before we do the runes. So we're going to go to the material properties and we're going to create new, and which we should see material 01. And we're going to change the surface type to glossy, BSDF. And we're going to change the roughness value to 0.15, so it's shiny. And we're going to change the color of it from this gray-white to a gold color. And I just input it in manually instead of just choosing from the color wheel. And I put in FFD 700 for my gold. And we're going to turn on the material layer at the top right, viewport shading, so we can see how that looks. And we've got this really nice shiny gold. So now we're going to go to the shading. So now that we're at the shading menu, we're going to move on to step 2, and that's creating more materials to add on to our ring, like the runes. So we're going to create a new material, and I'm just going to select material 001 again, and then I'm going to select this duplicate, so we can duplicate what we have for nodes. And we have the glossy and the material output that we can see here. But we need to add 2 more nodes. And the first node that we're going to add is the image texture, which if you do not have the image texture, it'll be in the description of what we use in this video. Now that we've added the image texture node, we're going to add one more input node, and we're going to go to the search bar and type in bump. So now we have our bump map. Here's all of our nodes together. Going to put the bump node into the normal for glossy. And we're going to put color to strength for the image texture. And then after that, we're going to assign it to this face here. And I have the sides of it selected where the runes are going to be. Right at the top and in the middle, 0.15. And now we'll be moving to step 3, which is fixing the UVs on our model. And we're going to go to UV editing. And we can see our UVs here, and they aren't quite right. They're kind of in these straight up and down rows. So I'm gonna go to the Blender UVs, and I'm gonna do Smart UV Project here. Everything looks good. All these values, so we're gonna click OK. And I'm just gonna select the top part for now, and we'll worry about the sides later. So we're going to have to scale this image to the ring. So I'm going to grab the UVs and I'm going to put the circle inside the other circle. And this is probably going to take me a few minutes to adjust. So now that I finished adjusting these lines, I'm going to go back to the shading, and we're going to do the same exact thing, but for the bottom of the ring. But before we do that, we actually need to change where the color is hooked up. We actually want to hook that up to height. So for the Shang-Chi image, we're going to select color, and we're going to put that in the normal for the bumps rather than the strength. And we can see all the cool detail that we have for that. And the rest of the model is not well done yet, but we will now adjust those at the bottom and the middle. Also, feel free to make some small adjustments to any of the UVs. Here I'm just adjusting it just a little bit. So now that we finished the top area, now we're going to be working on the bottom area. And I'm going to go back to edit mode, select these faces in a row. And we're going to do the exact same thing for the bottom as we did for the top. So we're also going to assign it that same material that we used for the top. We don't have to change it or anything. And I'm just going to go back to the UVs and get a good view of the bottom. I'm going to Smart UV, have the same settings, and then make the same adjustments that I used for the top. So I'm just doing the same thing. I'm grabbing the faces and I'm going to be making it a little smaller this time because it seems to have made it larger. And I'm just going to line up this ring with the image. So now that I finished the back and the front, I'm just going to go back to the shading and look at it from the top and bottom. Make sure everything looks good. I'm going to go in edit mode. And I'm going to select the faces in the middle of the ring. And we're going to create a brand new material for the middle because it's not going to be quite like the gold. So I'm going to select new material. And then once I've selected new material, I'm actually going to be deleting the principled BSDF, and I'm going to be adding back the glossy. Now we're going to go back onto the glow effects for step 4, and we're going to finish up our step 4 glow effects. So after I delete it, I'm going to assign to the UVs that I have selected. I'm going to go to add the search bar, and I'm just going to type in glossy. So now that I have glossy, I'm going to hook that up to the material output. And I'm going to set it up to the surface. I'm also going to add a new node. The mix shader. And I'm going to hook the shader in between the material output. And I'm going to add another node. I'm going to add emission, which basically makes the material glow like it's a light. I'm going to hook up the shader to both the emission and the glossy. That way it's also glossy, but it also gives off light. Once I have that hooked up, I'm also going to be changing the emission color to a light blue. But if you wanted to create your own variant, you could also create red or pink or green. And I'm going to change the strength to 3. After that, I'm going to add a new input. I'm going to add a bump. That way we can get that same bumpiness from the other textures. I'm going to hook that up to our glossy like I did before. I'm going to hook it up to the normal. And I'm going to add one more input node, the image texture, which I'll be choosing the same image texture that we've been using for both the bottom and the top. I'm also going to hook that up to the height of the bump map. So after I've selected that, I'm going to go back to the UV editing, do the same thing, the Smart UV, and I'm just going to make the same adjustments. Now if your UVs end up kind of looking like mine, where it looks like a gridded graph, what you need to do is select all the faces, and then go back to the UV and choose Unwrap, and then we should get the same effect as we did before. So now that we've finished aligning the UVs on the ring, we're going to go back to the shading. And then here we're going to hook up the color of the image to the mix shader into the FAC. And we're going to change the glossy node to 0.15 for roughness to give it that shininess. And we can see the changes onto the model. And I'm going to change the color to FD700 for the glossy. So after I finish doing that, I'm going to add a new input node. I'm going to add a color ramp. That way we can make adjustments to the values. And before we make any adjustments, we have to hook it up to our other nodes here. So I'm going to take the alpha and I'm going to put that in the FAC, and the color is also going to go in the FAC. And I'm going to bring the color and put it into the FAC for the gradient. And here we can also adjust how much shows in the background versus the glossy and the emission. And I think that looks really good. I think that's a perfect balance. And we're going to change the distance of the bump to 0.05. So our last step, which is step 5, we're just going to make any slight adjustments to the UVs and just play around with the emissions and gradient to get the glowing effect that we want and being able to render that in the scene. So now that we have finished our model and it's all ready to go, all we have to do last is just put a plane underneath and render the image, which we can do, set up the lighting, maybe put it with other objects. And thank you for watching, and I appreciate you staying around to see all the steps, and I hope you are also able to do the Shang-Chi ring with me. Bye bye! Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button or subscribe for more of our videos. If you want to learn more about 3D modeling, check out some of these videos.